we differ on a lot of issues politically. I think that's fair to say.
Definitely.
You voted for Scott Walker.
Yes.
I voted for Robert Burke of the Libertarian Party. You've supported Trump. I've supported Gary Johnson. But we both agree heavily that people should remain nonviolent. That the Antifa and the alt-right share a lot of violent characteristics.
Oh, definitely. They actually have a lot more in common than they differ at this point because of the violence and, quite frankly, because of what their policy goals are very similar as well.
They're both anti-capitalist.
Yep. Very big government.
They're a weird association to socialism and communism in some way. And what do you think about the violence we're even seeing, like when guys like Milo Yiannopoulos comes to a town, there'll be stuff burnt on fire.
Yeah, they all riot. It's basically an attempt to silence opposition. It's almost a political tactic in a way. You can look it up in Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, and it's right in there as well. If they raise a big enough fuss, then the university usually capitulates, and all of a sudden you don't have the speaker there, you don't have Milo there, you don't have Ann Coulter and that type of thing, and it's always people that happen to be conservative that these people are stopping.
I mean, and what do you think about the fact that Jewish conservatives like Milo Yiannopoulos and Ben Shapiro are being compared to Nazis?
Kind of ironic, if you ask me. There's a lot of ironies in this. I mean, the most interesting video I saw was a journalist. I forgot who they were from, the MSNBC or something. They were interviewing one of these Antifa protesters, and they're talking about hating fascism and all that stuff. And then they said, okay, the interview's over. They turn around and they're recorded walking to the car to get into their car, which happened to be a Volkswagen, which I found very ironic. Because we all know the history of Volkswagen. I mean, they're not the way they are today, but that was Adolf Hitler's baby there.
So what do you think about what's going on in the country? I mean, is it just a lack of debate, a lack of allowing the debate?
I think it's deliberate. I think there is some manufacturing going on here, whether it's the media trying to do it to get ratings. I think this whole anti-Trump mentality, like the guy or not, separate the man from what his movement was. His movement was not an ideological movement, because ideologically he's more moderate, and in a lot of cases a lot more liberal than most Republican candidates have been in the past. But it was about people getting fed up with government and all that stuff. And so when you attack the establishment, and we even saw some of that anti-establishment fever in the Bernie Sanders movement as well on the Democrat side. But when you attack the establishment starts to protect itself. They circle the wagons. And I think that we saw that happen on both sides, and now all of a sudden, almost like they're working together. Because Trump's going after Republican establishment as well as Democrat establishment. And the best way to do it is to demonize him. And who has control of the bully pulpit right now, and that is the media, the dominant media, which really hates Trump. They're really mad at Trump because they really wanted Hillary Clinton, and it was egg on all their faces because they all predicted Hillary Clinton in a landslide. But and Donald Trump won, and they don't like it.
The Antifa people, the people who are literally pepper spraying Trump supporters and hitting conservatives with bike locks and throwing M80s into crowds and bricks. Do you think that might actually end up having the opposite of what they wanted? Stuff like that, could that get Trump reelected by committing violence?
I think what it's doing is broadening his support base. I think people are seeing through the media narrative as well. I think we've got the makings of a potential landslide in 2020 if he decides to run again. I'm wondering if he'll even run again. He'll be, 77 at the time?
Well, who knows?
Would he want to put himself through this? He doesn't need to. His life is set.
Well, here's a good question. Why are Democrats losing?
Democrats are losing because they have no message other than the other guy sucks. There is no question about it. Hillary Clinton's whole campaign was, I'm not Donald Trump. Donald Trump's evil. Donald Trump. What does she say in her book? Donald Trump gave me the creeps. but she still hangs around with Bill Clinton. So, I mean, let's be real here. There was absolutely no message. And we've seen this election cycle after election cycle. 2004, John Kerry went after George W. Bush at the time. John Kerry was like, we hate George W. Bush. And then we saw, a little bit in the McCain years, but mostly in the Mitt Romney years. He was basically saying, I'm not Barack Obama. Okay.
Wait, I gotta ask, now as a conservative, what did you think of Ron Paul and his son Rand Paul and what they've brought to your party?
I like what they bring to the debate. My problem is there aren't enough of them to make a difference. So what we try to do is get little pieces of what we can. I tend to lean, I have some more libertarian leanings as well. I don't care who marries who and all that stuff, but whatever. But what they're trying to do is get this all or nothing approach. And
In the end, we still have things like Obamacare because everybody wants all or nothing. It's got to be perfect. We're never going to get perfection. On the flip side, I think we need to do something. First thing, you start out big, try to get everything you want. That doesn't pass, you take out the pieces till you can finally make it happen. Instead of what they're coming in with as little as possible, and we're stuck with that. And yeah, but anyway, I think Rand Paul at some point needed to step up to the plate and say, I recognize that he wasn't in the majority. And the same thing as they did in the House of Representatives with the Freedom Caucus. They finally, they put a pause on the Obamacare repeal, got a few things that they wanted, and it passed.
Randy Bryce and Paul Ryan running for Congress, that race alone. Randy Bryce versus Paul Ryan, what do you think about that?
Well, I think it is a safe Republican district. I think there's going to be a lot of attention to it, but in general, Paul Ryan is going to circle the wagons. He's going to do everything he can to win. He's going to, he spent $10.5 million in his primary last year. It's not going to go Democrat. I don't see it happening. There's going to be some attention paid to it, and there's going to be some money thrown at it. But we all saw, in those special elections, the two or three congressional seats that were up for grabs, that were in safe Republican districts, but then a Democrat came in, and the Democrats threw millions of dollars in there.
The special elections this year.
Right. They threw millions of dollars in there and still lost.
Yep.
That says a lot. Of course, the Republicans are saying, well, the Republican barely won in a safe district. Well, that district never had this much financial attention in the past. When you throw millions of dollars, generally the Democrats are going to do a little bit better than they usually do. But in the end, it shows that I don't think there's this big wave.
And we're here on the river in Milwaukee, right? This city is the city of Andy Gron. How did the guy running for governor now? Andy Gronick?
I don't know his last name.
But there's a guy named Andy, and he's a millionaire, and he's running as the Democratic candidate.
Well, we also have found out Tony Evers is going to run as well, so I kind of snicker at that one. But anyway,
and Mike McCabe, and possibly Paul Soglin.
It basically says the Democrats don't have much of a bench.
And Brett Halsey.
Yeah, they've got no bench to. Scott Walker looks like he's going to remain governor for a while longer if he officially chooses to run.
And there's a guy I don't agree with him on a lot of his policies, but I don't doubt that he will most likely get reelected.
And I agree with him on most of his policies, but and even then, it's the fact that the matter, the state shows up for him.
And what's an issue that's important to you?
Fiscal issues, taxation, that type of thing. I think that it doesn't matter where you stand on any of the social issues. None of that matters until if we don't get our fiscal house in order. And we need to start making some spending cuts. We need to start, being aggressive in tax reform, so it's not so. You can't penalize and tax your way into prosperity. It's not possible. You got people freaking out. The Democrats are freaking out about this Foxconn deal here in Wisconsin. Basically, they don't want to give Scott Walker and Donald Trump a win.
Well, the minority leader, Peter Barca, voted for it.
I know.
And Corey Mason and the representative from Kenosha.
Yeah, they know what a win this would be for their districts, if anything. But the way I look at it, okay, we're conducting zero taxes from Foxconn today. And when they put their plant in, they said by the end of the year they'll have infrastructure here. We're going to be collecting zero taxes from them still. So really, what are we losing? We're not losing any revenue. What the Democrats are complaining about, they want that revenue so they can go spend it.
Well, I, as a libertarian, might argue about Keynesian economics, but I'm sure
Yeah.
that's not the argument the Democrats are going to pose.
No.
The Democrats, they never. It's funny, is the things that Democrats seem to criticize about, and then there's things that they don't criticize the Republicans about other issues.
All right.
But
But we don't. The reality is, when you tax corporations, it only affects consumers, because the price of a product, any given product. I like to use the example of the oil companies. They want to give the windfall tax on oil companies because they're making so much profit, and so they want to suck it to them. So what do they think that the oil company is going to pay that tax out of the goodness of their own heart? No, they're going to increase the cost of their product, so we're going to pay more to pump. That's what happens. That's basic economics 101. It's a cost of doing business, and that cost is passed on to the consumer that purchases said product.
here we are. I'm a libertarian. You're a conservative, and
We don't have baseball bats?
we don't have baseball bats. We don't have M80s. We have.
Well, when the camera stops rolling, I'll just throw you in the river. It's way worse than that.
What do we have to do to get people of different ideas to talk rationally?
They need to take the emotion out of it. That's the only way. I'm sorry, the people that are manipulating, that are hiring protests, the basic rent-a-mobs to come in. I mean, there's anecdotal and some physical evidence that they were placing ads on Craigslist and some other places. There was another website too. It's basically like Rent-A-Mob.
Yeah.
But they were coming in by the busloads. The night before, there were no Antifa protesters. The night before, when they were walking around,
Yeah.
the KKK, they were walking around with their torches and doing their thing, spewing whatever hate speech they want to spew or whatever.
Anti-Semitic, evil
Yeah.
garbage.
Yeah, I mean, we
which
can all agree on.
both disagree with.
Yep. And then nothing happened. They did their march, they went home, and the next day they came back and they started doing. And the big argument, because I like to say, well, why did Antifa show up to peacefully protest with baseball bats and helmets and masks and stuff like that? They weren't there to peacefully protest. They were there to stir stuff up. And then they always say, well, the Nazis showed up with guns. Name me one person that was shot at that melee. Not one person was shot. Yeah, you had one moron who got in his car, which we've now found out that he's actually in treatment for schizophrenia and things like that. So it's out there. Of course, the dominant media is not reporting it, but he's got some issues. It doesn't justify what he did.
Yeah.
But he needs to pay the price for what he did. It's not like the organizers, the KKK or alt-right, all these people, whatever alt-right even means, they didn't show up one day. Okay, and at 3 o'clock on Saturday, we're going to make sure that this guy gets in his Dodge Challenger and kills someone.
I mean, we're dealing with hate groups and terrorist groups, and it's blurry as to all of them suck basically. And then, and that's the thing is, if you call for pacifism right now, you'll get attacked. There, if you say both of them are wrong, people are saying, oh, you're comparing them as equals. It's like, no, they're one might be worse, but they're both bad.
And Donald Trump was absolutely right to say there was bad things on both sides, because someone threw a punch. Doesn't matter who threw the first punch, and someone retaliated. So basically, someone was violent, and someone retaliated with violence. They answered it with violence.
I mean, it's really hard to know what exactly happens in these cities because you've got journalists from different perspectives getting a different, say. But we've been seeing this going on now throughout the country where people are getting together, they're coming to a city to fight each other.
Right. Well, we saw that after Trump's speech in Phoenix. You got all these people. They weren't Antifa shows up. They weren't even fighting the neo-Nazis or anything like that. They were fighting cops. And there's, there have been bad things done by police. There have been good things done by police and stuff like that. Once again, a microcosm of the whole group. You can't pin the actions of one individual or a small faction on the whole group. But what I see with Antifa, it seems to be becoming more and more prevalent in the Democratic Party, because they're getting a pass from the media, which tends to be predominantly liberal. They're getting it's okay if they're violent because they're supporting a cause.
It's a very complicated issue.
Well, the best way to get them to come to the table is start actually, like I said before, stop being so emotional and start listening to each other. And
I'm not saying, and the fact of the matter, the media reports on this stuff. If they wouldn't get all this publicity, they'd kind of fade away. You know?
They kind of could go for both sides of
Right.
the extreme.
Right.
So,
And we need to stop capitulating when these people do things, whatever. You know, okay, fine. There's a statue. There's a statue of the Fonz somewhere over here.
It is, right there.
Yeah, the bronze Fonz. You know, are there a bunch of women going to get together and tear down the bronze Fonz because he's perceived to be misogynist? I don't know.
is Fonzie misogynistic? Anyone? I don't know.
But that's what it's coming down to. It's absolutely ridiculous. You know, you got some people that defaced the Abraham Lincoln statue in downtown Chicago. Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves. Wait a minute.
Well, and even if maybe somebody could pose the argument that bad statues should maybe stay as a reminder of like the things that we once did, how bad things were, and maybe where we've come from.
Yeah, I think we need to. We can't hide from our history. We had some horrible parts of our history. I think if they would go up to, say, city council, if people in that city say, yeah, we don't want this statue anymore, let's have a vote. Okay, everybody votes, majority votes to get rid of the statue, fine. Take the statue down, maybe put it in a museum or something where it's in context. And, you know, this way
Or maybe even, say, putting a larger statue of someone like Dr. King next to it might actually show where we've come, from and to.
Yeah, I could care less if somebody has a statue or not. I've never looked at a statue. Oh my God, it's a statue!
There's an offensive question, because I've been thinking about this, and this is really going to upset some people out there, but does it seem like people on the left are more concerned about removing statues than our troop presence overseas?
Possibly.
I mean, where are the protests about moving troops out of Iraq and Afghanistan like we saw 10 years ago, 12 years ago?
I want to see the protests about the gun violence down in Chicago, not, all the people that are getting murdered, gang violence and all that stuff.
We have a gun epidemic in certain cities where young men are being shot.
But the problem is we're focusing on the implement and not on the individual pulling the trigger. That's the problem. They're not getting. There's a problem. We aren't incarcerated. There's no deterrence. I mean, look at Milwaukee. They don't even chase you if you carjack
maybe it's not about the punishment more. Is like, what do you think is maybe providing an economic? Is there an economic solution to give somebody better opportunity out there? I mean,
well, the economic solution. I mean, and it comes into the other subject of like, do we need a $15 an hour minimum wage or whatever? What it comes down to is the fact that. Okay, nobody needs $15 an hour to flip a burger. I'm sorry, but the problem is you've got all these $15 an hour jobs leaving because manufacturing is leaving the inner cities and stuff like that. So they're left with one choice. They've got McDonald's or Burger King, whatever. That's the choice that they have to work at. And so it creates a world where if we start getting these companies to start coming back in and start putting some economic stimulus here, a lot more important things than a stupid trolley that, Tom Barrett.
Trolley will solve.
A federally funded trolley, so we wonder why our government's so much in debt. Something that nobody's ever going to ride. We've got crime, we've got poverty, but yet we need a trolley.
The Democrats have a trolley.
Yeah, and that was all Democrats, so it has nothing to do with us. But the reality, that's the type of stuff. We're losing the focus. People need $15 an hour to flip burgers. No, they don't. They need jobs that are worth $15 an hour to come back to the city. Because on the bus lines and all that stuff. So we can get economic development going. Trump was right. Good, bad, or indifferent. I think he was right. We need better infrastructure in this country. We've got a power grid. Don't you just have? Look what happened. Remember, it was in 2000. I think it was 2001. Not too long after 9/11, when New York City suddenly, that whole area, the power grid went down.
Yeah.
You know how easy it would be to take down a power grid with an EMP or something like that? Yeah, we definitely have to modernize all that stuff. So I agree with Trump. We have to do that. And he's been the only one saying any of this. But of course, it's not a pet project by the Republicans or the Democrats, so they're all like, oh, you can't talk about that. The Democrats don't want Trump to have any wins because then he comes out heroic. The Republicans don't want him to have any wins because then it makes it look like they haven't been doing anything lately. So I'm mad at both parties. So
in closing, like I said, I'm a libertarian, you're a conservative, and here we are in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, having a civil debate with no violence necessary.
Oh, I want to kick your ass, man. Okay. So,
Thank you for talking with us.
all right, thank you. Bye, everyone.